Okay, I'm back. Welcome to my kitchen again. Today we're doing things a little bit different. I was going to make breaded meat, and then my foot is a little bit swollen on the right side, so we're going to do beef stroganoff. We're going to flip the two videos, and I'm going to record the beef stroganoff. I'm not going to start making it. It's only 2:30. Hasn't much time, but I've started to get some of the prep work done. And I'm going to show you that I'm actually going to turn you. I have my Instant Pot. That's what we're going to use today. If you have an Instant Pot, you're going to want to definitely use that. If you do not have an Instant Pot, but you have a pressure cooker, you can also use that. It's going to be a little bit different in the way of how I explain to do stuff because we're focusing on an Instant Pot. But I'll show you if you have a regular pressure cooker, you can also do this in a regular pressure cooker. You're also going to, we have our noodles, and in the earlier video that you guys saw, I had the chuck. The chuck is whole. It's a whole steak. We're going to take care of that, and we're going to actually make those into bite-sized pieces for the stroganoff, and I'm going to do that. And it's a really, really straightforward how to do that. I'm going to actually put you guys down, and hopefully you guys will be able to see this, that you guys will get a good view. I may have to put that up just a little bit. I don't know if this will lock in place. Hopefully, yeah, you guys should be able to see that. Okay, this can be done ahead of time, and you can actually, sometimes it's easier the day you buy your roast to do it the same day that you buy it. You can always freeze it if you're not going to use that. And actually, I need to move you guys for a second because, you know, I put you on the garbage can. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that out, throw this away. Now I'm going to put you guys back down. Okay, you guys can, for that, I'm going to step out of frame for a second. I'm going to wash my hands. Now, normally with the beef stroganoff, a lot of people use beef stew. And you might be asking, okay, all of my recipes for beef stroganoff are using beef stew meat. Why are you not using beef stew meat? Well, I'll tell you the truth. Stew meat is very tough, and it takes a very, very long time to cook stew meat to get it nice and tender. It's a very tough part of the cow. And usually when you use stew meat for stews, you're going to do a long cook. Stews can go for a very long time on the stovetop. Usually you cook it in the stovetop. You can also do a stew in the pressure cooker. You would probably do it more on the slow cook versus a pressure cooking. So why do I use the ground chuck? Well, it has more of a fat content to it, and I'm going to kind of show you guys that you can see. Hopefully you can get a good view, but there's a lot of fat in this, and that keeps the meat moist. It also adds a lot of flavor to the meat, but we're going to get rid of, I'm actually going to put you, see if I can, nope, I don't want to pull you guys too far up, but what we're going to do is we're going to put this. So these big chunks of meat, I'm just going to take my knife, and there is no real right way or wrong way to cut this. You're just going to basically cut it into chunks, and you're going to try to keep them bite-sized. So that's one. You can leave a little bit of fat, and I'm going to show you there's a little fat right there. That's okay to leave. I'm going to show you this piece I haven't done. This piece, however, I'm going to, oh, there we go. You see all of this? That's all fat. Same with this. This is all fat. You don't want that in your you don't want that in your stroganoff, because really what all that's going to do is make your stroganoff very fatty. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take, and I'm going to pull a little bit of the meat off. And this is all fat. Hopefully you guys can see it. There's a little tiny bit of meat that was left on there. Don't worry about that, but this is all fat. Throw that out. That's not going to add any flavor to your stroganoff. Having a little bit of fat, though, is not a bad thing to have. You just don't want a lot of fat in your stroganoff. And here's what I'm doing. I'm just making them into little tiny chunks that are going to be bite-sized. And you're going to do that pretty much for the entire roast. I'm not going to show you or film the entire roast, but you're just going to do it for the entire roast. And anywhere you see fat, like you see fat running through here, you're just going to kind of take that out of the mixture when you cut it. If you want to do smaller chunks, you certainly can do smaller chunks. If you want to do a little bit bigger, you can do a little bit bigger. And one chuck roast will probably feed a family of 4 if you're 2 adults and 2 kids. If you're 2 like my husband and I, this will definitely feed both of us, and it'll also give us another day meal. We're probably going to freeze this because chances are tomorrow I will make the bread and meat. And you'll have a lot of leftovers, but this freezes quite nicely. The only thing I would suggest not doing is don't freeze your noodles. You can always make fresh noodles. Noodles, when they've been cooked, have a tendency to lose some of their elasticity, and they don't taste as good when they're fresh. So you're probably going to get maybe 20 pieces. I'm kind of looking, I might have a little bit more. This was a pretty big chuck roast, and like I said, you can buy these, you can get these usually on a fairly good sale. They go on sale quite readily. You can also, like I said, with a chuck roast, you can also make pot roast out of this. So if you're a smaller family and you're like, well, this is a lot of meat, because usually chuck roasts will weigh in anywhere from 4 to 6 pounds, depending on how big they are. You might say, well, that's a lot of meat. You can always divide this in half, make half beef stroganoff, and use the other half for a pot roast. And sometimes I do that. So we're just gonna finish cutting this really fast. I've got pretty much 3 more sections to do. Yeah, let me get these done. Now, is it okay to leave some fat in? Like I said, yes, you can leave a little bit of fat in. That's not going to harm the stroganoff, and it's actually going to give your stroganoff a little bit of flavor. You just don't want a lot of fat in your stroganoff. Now, obviously, if you're vegetarian, you're not going to do this part because you're not going to use meat, and I'm going to teach you. Now, with the leftover fat that you have, go ahead and throw that out. The fat really serves no purpose. If you, long time ago when my grandparents were still alive, they used to feed the birds in the wintertime, especially when the ground is frozen and the birds can't eat worms or get their nutrition. They would put out a suet. You could add the fat to a suet thing and put that outside for the birds, and the birds will eat it. But if you're not doing that, throw out your fat because you're not going to use it. And always when working with meat, after you've worked with meat, always wash your hands because you don't want bacteria to start forming and then contaminate other surfaces. Put that in there. And I'm going to bring this over. I'm going to bring you guys down just a little bit. Okay. And this is my meat for the stroganoff. So what I'm going to do, and like I said, you can do this ahead of time. You can do this the day that you buy the roast. If you're not going to make stroganoff, quarter it, freeze what you're going to use, or cut what you're going to use, and then freeze it in the cubes. That way you have already cubed meat. You can also use this in stew. This is going to cook a lot quicker than stew meat, and it's actually going to be cheaper than what you pay for stew meat. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the refrigerator because it's coming up to 3 o'clock. I'm still about 2 hours away from cooking, but I'm gathering our ingredients. So stay tuned to follow what we do. Hi all, this is just a quick kitchen talk. I'm starting to film the parts for the beef stroganoff. And if you've watched or are watching that video, you might notice that I put the beef stroganoff in the refrigerator. And you might be wondering, well, you've always said take meat out of the freezer or refrigerator and let it get to room temperature. That's true for roast, ribs. When you're grilling something, you want to do that. When you're making the beef stroganoff, it's only 2:51 here. I'm not actually going to start the cook until 5:30. So I have plenty of time. That would give a window of 2.5 hours. My stroganoff doesn't need to stay out that long. So I'm not going to take it out until about a half an hour before I'm going to get ready to use it. So when doing this, if you're going to do this prep work a day ahead of time or a couple of days ahead of time, or even if you're going to freeze it, take it out of the freezer a couple of days before to let it naturally thaw out. But you don't need to take the meat out 2 hours in advance of cooking. Half an hour for a beef stroganoff or even a pot roast. A pot roast, I would probably take out an hour before, especially if it's an entire roast, just to let that get room temperature, and then flour it just before you start to fry it in the pan. But anyway, I digress. I'm going to get back, and I'm going to try not to say as much as I've been doing. Okay, I got my pressure cooker right here. I'm just making sure. It's been a minute since I've used the pressure cooker, or I should say the Instant Pot. You might notice that I am going to call it a pressure cooker because it actually has the feature of a pressure cooker. But it's also known as the Instant Pot because that's who makes it. So mine has been sitting for a minute. I haven't used it in a couple of months. And it's a little bit dusty on the top. So I'm going to go ahead and wash its lid. I'm just checking the inside of my pot. And you might notice this area. Well, don't be alarmed. This actually is clean. That's just from previous cooks where it's kind of taken on a staining of when I've cooked meals. That's not going to affect its pot, and it's definitely not going to affect the flavors of the meal. So this is clean. I'm just going to give it a wash. When I get ready in a couple of hours, I will come back and I will show you what we do start to finish. So stay tuned.